A very good morning, class 9 students. I welcome you all on this online platform provided by Jagriti Classes. We were doing chapter 14, that is natural resources, from class 9 science textbooks. So we are going to continue with our same chapter. So this video lecture is for class 9th and we are doing chapter 14, natural resources. So in the previous video lecture, we have talked about how the soil is formed, okay? So I've given you a flow chart or the mechanism for the formation of soil. So now I told you that various factors or various agents, you can say, which are responsible for soil formation. So these are the various agents which are given in your book. The first one is the sun, the next one is water, then it is wind, and then living organisms. So I already told you the name of all these four agents which are responsible for forming the soil. Now, today we will be describing in detail that how these factors or agents, they help in soil formation. So let's start with the first, that is the sun. So what it is given that the sun, when it heats up the rocks, then they expand. So if I write a summary, then for the first point, that is for the sun, you have to remember then that when the sun heats up the rocks, then on heating the rocks undergo expansion, that is they increase in size. So the rocks expand due to heating. But what happens is during the night time when there is no kind of sunlight, then the temperature drops down or the temperature is low compared to the temperature at the daytime. And due to this decrease in temperature, the rock which was heated up, now it gets cooled. And due to cooling of the rock compresses in size. So we'll write, now because of heating up, the rock enlarged in size or expanded. But when the rock cools down, then what happens is, after the cooling down of rock, the rock compresses. Compression means it reduces in size. And as a result of this expansion and compression, what happens is, not all the particles or not all the regions of the rock expand and compress at the same rate. So this expansion and compression, we can say the expansion of rock and the compression is not uniform, in nature. Not uniform means it can be possible that one part of the rock which is present at or which is in direct contact with the sunlight. Assume this is your rock, okay? Now this portion of the rock is in direct contact to the sunlight which is coming. Whereas the lower portion, this region, is not receiving such amount of sunlight. It is receiving low amount of sunlight compared to the region at the top. So what will happen? This region would get heated up much faster compared to the lower part or to the lower region. Yes, the difference between the upper and the lower region would be sufficiently very less, but the difference would be there definitely. And due to this difference of temperature, the rate of expansion and compression is not uniform or is not equal at whole of the surface of rock. And due to this non-uniform rate of expansion and compression, the rocks develop cracks in their structure. And this rate leads to the formation of cracks in the rocks. And when the cracks are formed in the rocks, hence these cracks, they deepen down with time and then the rock breaks up into smaller rocks. And what is soil? How soil is formed? When large pieces of rock, they break up by various agents into the smaller pieces, and then these smaller pieces which are very small in size, they make the soil. So in turn, the sun is responsible in this manner for formation of soil. The next factor is water. So how water helps in the formation? See, whenever some rocks are there near to the contact of water or which are having a contact with water, what would happen? Let's suppose, consider a rock, okay? This is a rock here and a continuous stream of water flows along the rock. So what would happen with time? this water stream or this water flow, it would rub the rock and it would break the rock at this contact point, okay, into very smaller or fine particles, and then it would lead to soil formation. So water helps in formation in two ways. The one way I told you, water, okay, this I told you that flowing water, it wears away hard rocks over long periods of time, because this water is flowing with a very higher speed, and this speed, it rubs off the rock and it breaks the rock from this surface which is in contact with the water, and hence you have the formation of soil. The next way which is given, which is the first way, water could get into the cracks, these cracks which are formed in the rocks. Now water gets into the crack, and when there is, we can say, because the heating is non-uniform, you have the formation of cracks, and in these cracks, when the water gets in, at night, when the temperature is quite lower, the water gets freezes and it expands. So see, the water get into the cracks in the rocks formed due to uneven heating. In this, later the water would freeze out, and due to the freezing of water, it would crack up the rock, okay, or it would help the crack to widen up, and this would separate or break off your rock, and then you would have the formation of soil. Now coming on to the third, which is wind. So what is how wind helps in the soil formation, or what is the role of wind in the formation of soil? So in a process similar, one is the similar process as water. What wind would do is, let's suppose you have mountains, okay, we have mountains which are made up of rocks. Now when the fast flowing winds blow through the mountains, then what happens is, this wind, it causes the wearing off or breaking off of the particles which are in direct contact with the wind. And because the wind is flowing with a high velocity, then it breaks off the particles of the surface particles, and these surface particles, they form the soil. So in this manner, the wind is helpful. Now we'll see living organisms. So how living organisms are helpful? See, living organisms, the first one which you have to study is lichens. The lichen, what is a lichen in fact? If we see, what is a lichen? So lichen is a symbiotic association between an algae and a fungus. Okay? So lichen is a symbiotic association between one algal component and the next component is the fungi. So lichen, what do you mean by symbiotic association? Symbiotic association is when two organisms, they live together and both the organisms are benefited from this association, okay? So symbiotic means two components or two organisms are living together, and in this type of association, both the organisms have mutual benefits. Okay, the algae is also benefited and the fungus, the next component, is also benefited. So you should know this, that lichen is in symbiotic association, and the two components of lichen are algae and fungus or fungi. So what happens is, remember one thing also, this lichen, this is also an indicator of air pollution. Okay, it is an indicator of air pollution. What do I mean to say is, lichens, whenever they are present, or we can say the place which is having no or very less air pollution, only that place would contain lichens. Okay, lichens are very frequently observing species. They are found on the barks of trees. So if you find lichens growing on the bark of tree, then you can say that that region has no air pollution or very less air pollution. Okay, so now we are moving that how lichens help in causing soil formation. So these lichens, they grow on the hard rock surface, and when they grow on the hard rock surface, they secrete some of the chemicals. Some chemicals are being released by these lichens outside their bodies, and these chemicals, they destroy the rocks. So in turn, these lichen helps in breaking the rocks, and once the rock breaks into smaller and smaller particles, then we have the formation of soil itself. Okay, so these lichens, see, they grow on the surface of rocks. While growing, they release certain substances, that chemicals, which powder down the rocks, and then you have the formation of soil. Now, other animals and plants also contribute to soil formation. Like the plants which grow on the mountains or which grow on the rocks, what do they do is, the cracks which are formed, these plants, they grow in the cracks, and their roots, the roots of these plants, roots penetrate into these cracks, and when the plant root expands, it breaks off the rock. And when the rock would break off, we would obtain soil. Okay? So you can see other small plants which I told you, moss, are able to grow on the rock surface, and they cause the rock to break up further. The roots of big trees sometimes go into the cracks, and these widen up. When the roots grow bigger, the crack is forced to be bigger, and when the crack develops bigger in size, then the rock in turn breaks off. So this gives you an account that what are the agents which are responsible for formation of soil. So first thing in this, we discussed what do you mean by soil and how the formation of soil takes place by means of a flow chart. Then I told you there are many agents which are responsible for soil formation. So we have discussed all the agents in detail. Now one next topic which we'll be starting is, what do you mean by soil erosion? Okay, and one topic which we'll be just discussing is the importance of soil. I hope you all have, or you all know why the soil is important to us. Because in the soil the plants grow. If there would be no soil, then the growth of plants would be limited. Okay, we'll not have such a huge variety of plants which we see in our environment around us. So the soil is helpful for the growth of plant. Then again, can you think of any other necessity, or can you think of any other importance of the soil? So the answer would be yes, there are many importance. I would like you to find out the importance of soil and do write it down in your notebooks. Okay? So importance of soil, you can also say that rainwater, when the rain comes, then this soil, if everywhere you would have a cemented floor, then the rainwater would just flow away from the floor, and it would not be able to penetrate inside the ground. Okay, because the hard floor does not allow rainwaters to seep up into the ground. But if you have the presence of soil, then this soil has some intermolecular space. And because you have space between the particles of soil, the rainwater which comes, it seeps up into the ground. And when this rainwater reaches the ground, then it recharges the underground water table. Okay, so likewise you can find many importance of the soil. Now we are discussing the next topic, which is soil erosion. So this is just a definition, and this you all know, you have read in your junior classes. We can categorize soil into different layers. So the topmost layer of the soil, which contain humus, and it is the most fertile layer, it is called as topsoil. And when this fertile layer, that is when this topsoil gets eroded, it is called, it is known as soil erosion. So soil erosion erosion means removal. So removal of the topmost layer or removal of topsoil is called soil erosion. And what is this topsoil? Topsoil is the first layer or the surface layer of the soil. Then this topsoil, it contains large amount of humus, and therefore this is the most fertile layer what you have. And so most of the roots of the plant are present in this layer, that is in the topsoil. And removal of topsoil is called soil erosion. And what is humus? I hope you all know. Humus is the dead and decaying remains of plants and animals. Okay, so this is soil erosion, and this is a brief idea about topsoil. So now we'll see what are the factors which lead to soil erosion. So there are many factors which lead to soil erosion. The factors are the soil erosion can be caused by wind, then soil erosion can occur by water or by living organisms. Okay, so they are, and many other factors are there. So soil erosion can occur by wind, water and living organisms. So if we say how the wind creates the problem of soil erosion, so this wind, when the air blows with a very higher speed, then this air, if the land is barren, that is, if there are no, and one more you can include here is human activities. So if we say you have a barren land, barren means which contain no sort of trees on it. So what would happen is, when you have a barren land like deserts, then when the wind would flow or when the air would flow through these deserts, then it would erode off or remove the top layer of the soil, which is the topsoil. And when this topsoil is being removed, then this process is known as soil erosion. So wind causes soil erosion on barren land or deserts. Then you have water. So water is also the similar thing, and you can even call them to be floods. So whenever the water flows through if you have barren land, that is just the soil particles is present and there is no plant to hold these soil particles. So when the water would flow, then this water would carry away the top layer of the soil with it into the streams. So this would also cause soil erosion. Then you have living organisms or human activities, one and the same thing. So you can say that human activities like deforestation, then by living organisms you can have excessive grazing. Okay, then we have over cultivation. All these factors are responsible for creation of deserts. And when you have no sort of plants which can hold up the soil, then automatically you will observe soil erosion taking place. So these are some of the factors which cause soil erosion. You can write them in detail. You can explain that how these factors are responsible for soil erosion, okay, as I explained you now. So then you have what can we do or what can be done to prevent this problem of soil erosion. So you have some farming methods that reduce the soil loss or soil erosion you can see. So the first one in front of you is strip cropping. Then you have windbreaks, contour cropping, cover crops, terracing, no-till planting. Okay, so we'll be doing only some in detail, like contour cropping is being given in your NCERT textbooks. So what is contour cropping? When the crops are planted in curving rows to follow the contour of hills, this slows the runoff and reduces soil erosion. If you can see in the picture, so in this what it is given is, in the picture itself, it is written that when the plants are being grown in curving rows, so that it cuts off or it slows down the speed of soil erosion. So this method is in fact very helpful. Then what is windbreak? Windbreak is a type of method when the plants which we are having, this is our agriculture field and we are having small plants grown in our agriculture fields, okay. So these are the plants which I have in my agriculture field. You can take them to be the herbs or the grasses. So when the small plants are being grown in the agriculture field, they do not have much deeper root system. It means that they cannot have a very tight hold on the particles of soil. In turn, what we can do to prevent soil erosion in such an area is, we can plant many trees. We can plant large number of trees at the boundary wall, okay. Everywhere you can plant large trees, and these trees, what they'll do is, they'll keep a hold on the soil and they'll even break the winds which are coming towards the field. Now if the winds come across our field, then the speed or the velocity of wind would get reduced because you have a dense cover of plants, as you can see in the picture. So these plants, they act as a barrier or a warrior for the coming wind, and they decrease the speed of wind which comes to the agricultural field, and in turn, because the speed of wind is decreased or reduced, now no kind of soil erosion would take place. So this is again a method that is known as wind breaking, which prevents soil erosion. Then you can see that no-till planting. In it, what we do is seeds are planted in the ground without first tilling or plugging the soil. Dead plants from the previous crop remain on the ground. Their roots hold the soil in place. So I hope this is very clear. You have understood, okay? So we do not, when we are doing a new plantation, we do not plug the soil or till the soil. And what is there? The dead plants from the previous crops which are already present. Now we do not have any use of those plants. So what we do is we just cut. Let's suppose this is the field and you had these sort of plants in the field. Now what we are doing is we are not taking the whole crop or the whole plant outside. We are just cutting them to get the useful part. And we are remaining, or we are not taking the whole plant out, we are making the roots and the lower system to be attached with the plants. So these dead parts of the plants, they are attached with the soil. And what they help in, these dead parts of the plant, they have a tight control, or they hold the particles of soil very tightly with their roots. And hence in this manner, they prevent soil erosion. Okay, then the next one is terracing. Terracing is what you can see. We have done plantation in the form of steps, and these steps, they again cut off or reduce the speed of wind and water, and hence they prevent soil erosion. Then one more common method is done, which is known as mulching. So mulching is again a same method which reduces soil erosion. Mulching means whenever you have a field, okay, this is your field, and this field is covered by dead plants and animal remains, or you can cover it by certain like large leaves like the banana leaves. So the field, when it is not in use for farming, what the farmers do is they cover the field with, you can say, with the organic remains, or with large leaves, or with the wood remains, okay? And these all, the covering, it prevents the soil from getting eroded. Because mulching is what? Mulching is covering the topsoil with certain substances. So when we cover the layer of our topsoil with some organic substances, which means by the remains of plant or animals, then it is known as mulching. So I hope these methods are very clear. These are the steps by which we can prevent soil erosion. So now we have completed all the accounts of soil, that is how soil formation takes place, the agents responsible for soil formation, sun, wind, water and living organism. Then next we did what are the factors which lead to disruption or which lead to soil erosion, and some of the methods or the steps which we can take to prevent soil erosion. So you will be getting these kind of 4 types of questions you can be getting in your examination. So we have done this topic. Now we are moving on to the next topic, which is biogeochemical cycle. Okay, first I'll give you an introduction. What do you mean by the term biogeochemical cycle? And then we have to discuss 4 types of cycle. The 4 types of different types of cycle is being given in your book. Okay, so we'll be discussing one by one. Firstly, we'll be starting, what do you understand by this term biogeochemical cycle? So in this, if I break off the term into parts, then bio means living organism, and geo, you can take it to be the term geography, in which you learn about different physical parameters, different physical conditions, and geo are the non-living or abiotic components. Here living organisms are known as the biotic components. And chemicals means you are taking the substances which are having, or substances present in different chemical composition, like their elemental form, their combined form, etc. And cycle. Cycle means a cyclic process which is being going on continuously between the living, or we can say between the biotic and abiotic components. So cycle means a cyclic, dynamic. Cyclic means what? Continuous. And dynamic is also the same, that is, it is continuously going on. But whether it is continuous, it does not mean that it is unstable, okay? Being dynamic also, this is a very stable system. So cycle means a cyclic, dynamic, stable process in which transfer of matter and energy takes place. So now if you are clear with the different terms or the different words which make up the complete term biogeochemical cycle, then you can easily write the definition. So let's see, bio means the biotic or living components, geo means the abiotic or non-living things, chemical here means we'll be talking about the water cycle or the oxygen cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle. So what we are doing, let's suppose take an example of nitrogen cycle. If you observe the diagram of nitrogen cycle given in your books, then you will see that somewhere nitrogen is present in the elemental form, that is as N2 nitrogen gas. And at the same other time, you see nitrogen to be present in the combined form like nitrates, nitrites. So in the same cycle, in the same nitrogen cycle, you have the element nitrogen to be present in different forms. So that only I have written. Chemical means we are dealing with chemical substances like nitrogen here, and this nitrogen, it may have different chemical composition, which means it may have different forms. And next is what cycle I told you. It is a cyclic, continuous, dynamic process, and it is a very stable process in which what occurs is transfer of energy and matter takes place. So now if we write a proper definition for the term biogeochemical cycle using all the things which we have written, so it can be defined as cyclic process in which the transfer of matter and energy takes place. So it is a cyclic process in which the transfer of matter and energy takes place between the biotic and abiotic components. And we are considering the biotic and abiotic components of what? Of biosphere. Okay? So biogeochemical cycle means it is a cyclic process in which the transfer of matter and energy takes place between the biotic and the abiotic components of the biosphere. Biotic means the living components, abiotic means the non-living components. So next, the first cycle which we'll be starting is the water cycle, or it is also known as the hydrological cycle. So this picture in front of you, it represents the water cycle, or you can name it to be the hydrological cycle. So now what happens, we'll just do it because I know you have already learned them in your junior classes. So when the sun shines brightly on the surface of water, what happens is the water undergoes evaporation process. That is, the surface water, it evaporates and it gets converted from the liquid state to the gaseous state. So this is evaporation. Evaporation is what? Conversion of water from the liquid state to water vapors, that means to the gaseous state. With this, with the sun, the other factors which are responsible for increasing the amount of water vapor in the environments, the others are the plants. The plants undergo the process of transpiration. What do you understand by the process of transpiration? Transpiration is the loss of excess water from the leaves of the plant through its stomata. So transpiration is loss of water from the leaves through stomata. And this water which is lost through stomata, it is also in the form of water vapors. The next is the living organisms which undergo the process of respiration. They also contribute to increase the amount of water vapors present in the environment. Now what happens is, when these water vapors, they move up, then these water vapors get condensed and then they form the clouds here. So after evaporation, you should remember the next, which is known as the process of condensation. And what happens in the process of condensation? The water vapors, that is the waters in gaseous state, they cool down and they form clouds. So clouds are formed as a result of condensation. We have even discussed in great detail when we were discussing the topic of how clouds are formed. So after the formation of clouds, what happens is, the clouds, after formation of clouds, they undergo precipitation, and precipitation is maybe in the form of rain, or it may be in the form of snow. And then when this rain and snow, it falls on the ground, then it does three purposes. So the rain and snow, it serves three purposes. The first purpose is, it gives the water to the water bodies, that is, it prevents the water bodies from drying up. So we'll be writing that rain and snow prevents the water bodies from drying up. The next purpose is, when this rainwater, it may be absorbed by the plant and it helps in growth of plants. So rain helps in growth of plants. And the next very important process is what? When the rainwater, it goes into the ground, inside the ground, then this rainwater, it recharges the level of groundwater, and this we can write it as rechargement. It recharges the level of groundwater. And due to this, when the rainwater, it seeps down or it gets filtered as it passes through the soil. That's why we say that groundwater is the purest water which we have. So this rainwater, when it seeps below the ground, this process is known as infiltration. So infiltration is the process through which the recharge of groundwater occurs. That is, a proper level of groundwater is being maintained with the process of, or by the help of the process infiltration. So I hope this cycle is clear. You can draw the diagram itself. In these biogeochemical cycles, you should know the diagram, and then you should know the explanation. What can you explain by the diagram itself? Okay, so just stick to these points, learn the diagram, and then learn a brief explanation of that cycle. So this, I hope, is very clear. Now we'll be doing a next cycle, which is, we'll be first doing oxygen cycle. Okay, so we'll be doing oxygen cycle. So if you can see in the oxygen cycle, what you have is, oxygen is present in different forms in the environment. So you have the presence of different forms of oxygen in the environment. That is, I'll be writing it in short. Different forms of oxygen present in our environment. So the first is, oxygen is found in the gaseous state, and in gaseous state it is present in elemental form, and this elemental form is O2. So this O2 form is found in the atmosphere, or we can simply write in the air. Then it is also, now it is present in an elemental form, which means it is present in a free form. but it can also be present in a combined form. And this combined form, it is seen in air also, and it is seen in the Earth's crust also. So in the air, the combined form of oxygen is known as carbon dioxide. When the oxygen is combined with carbon in the air, it is known as carbon dioxide. And in the crust, you have different forms, like the oxygen form oxides with many metals. So it is present in the form of oxides of metals. Then next you can have, it is present in the form of carbonate. Then you have sulfates. So these are the different forms of oxygen which are present in the Earth's crust. Okay, nitrate, sulfate, carbonate, and metal oxides. So oxygen may be present in a free or elemental form, or it may be present in the form of or combined with others. So these are, then it may be present in the biological form. The third kind of form in which the oxygen can be present, it is present in the biological form. That is, it is present in the bodies of living organisms. For example, living organism as biomolecules. Biomolecules means oxygen is a component of carbohydrates. If you see the general formula of carbohydrates, then carbohydrates are the compounds which are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay, the number can vary, C, X, H, Y, O, Z. So then the oxygen can be present in proteins. Then you have oxygen to be present in some fats. So these are the different forms in which the oxygen can be present in our environment. Oxygen may be present in a free form, that is in the elemental form. Then it may be present as a combined form in air as CO2, and in the Earth's crust as oxides and various other chemical components. And then it may be present in the biological form. Now you have to see that what are the processes which are responsible for the release of oxygen to the environment, and what are the process in which the oxygen is being used. So first I am dealing with the process in which release of oxygen occurs. So there is only one process in which oxygen is released out in the environment, and this process is photosynthesis. That is the process in which the plants make food and they release oxygen. So you can see in photosynthesis, the process releases the oxygen back into the atmosphere or air. But there are three processes by which the oxygen is being used up. So the three processes in which oxygen is being used up, if we write the process which uses oxygen. So there are three kinds of process. The first one is combustion. For burning, oxygen is being used. The next one is respiration by living organisms. So for respiration, we all use oxygen, all living organisms use oxygen, and then it may be for the formation of these oxides and chemical components. So in short, I'll be writing for the formation of oxides. Okay, there is one more process, that is the process of nitrogen fixation. We'll be reading this process in detail when we'll be discussing nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen fixation is a process which takes place in the absence of oxygen. That is, whenever the oxygen is absent, only then this process occurs. So it means that this process requires oxygen to be absent. Okay? So these are the processes, and you can also say that in gaseous state, in the air you have 21% oxygen. So let's say how you can learn the cycle. You have atmospheric oxygen in the form of O2, I told you elemental form. Then this atmospheric oxygen is used by living organism for respiration, and when this oxygen is used up, this arrow is showing using up of oxygen by living organisms for respiration, and as a result of respiration, water is being released, and this water released from the organisms is used in the process of photosynthesis, which again returns the used oxygen to the environment. So you can see there is a continuous cyclic process. Oxygen is used up and then it is again returned to the environment itself. And then this oxygen, it may exist as an organic molecule, Like this is a molecule of glucose, which is a kind of carbohydrate. So from this glucose molecule also helps in respiration, and during respiration we say this molecule breaks down into carbon dioxide, and both these carbon dioxide and water, they are used as raw materials for photosynthesis, and they help in the formation of again the organic molecule and return the oxygen back to the environment from which it was used. So this is the simple oxygen cycle. So you have to learn this cycle, the diagram of the cycle, and then you can describe the cycle in this manner, and then you can explain that in these, you can explain these processes in detail, okay? Combustion, respiration, everything. So this completes your oxygen cycle. Now in the next class, we'll be doing nitrogen and carbon cycle. Then the topics left are greenhouse effect and the ozone layer, ozone hole formation. So this would complete your chapter. Thank you for joining today's class. I hope you find today's class very interesting, and you get to know and understand all the concepts which I explained you today. So we'll be taking next class tomorrow. Thank you for joining today's class. Till then, stay home, stay safe, keep studying.